I'm Cesar Loli from Wolfram Research South America, and my presentation is historical information on Wolfram language and Wolfram Alpha. I try to explain some of the historical content and functions on both systems. Hi, everybody. I'm going to make a presentation about the historical information we currently now have in the Wolfram language and Wolfram Alpha. I was the developer that did the most recent update of these packlets. Mainly, it includes the historical countries and military conflicts. This is a bit of a new area for the Wolfram language, trying to include the historical information that until recently we had only a sketch for. The historical countries mainly had end date. We try to overhaul it by adding polygons and other interesting information. The idea is to make computational history, to of making complex calculations with historical data, of learning about history in a way that is didactic, using maps, charts. It's a far better way to learn about history than reading it in a book or attending a lecture. It's far more visual, and we can use the functions that are already in the Wolfram language to exemplify this and show better this data. Instead of talking about this, I better start with an example. I choose the second Punic War. I don't know, I like it. But it's a good example. It's an important war, a world war of its era. It pitted of the time, the Carthage and the Roman Republic. We can see here what we can look about if we search this in alpha. Basically, were present previously. And here we have a map of the battles. All this basic information that we can give about the war, the participants. It includes more than the Romans and the Carthaginians. The timeline, the commanders for each faction. We can see that the commanders are also included by the nation. This is a bit more interesting because it's something we can do calculations. The casualties and forces present in each. And we can look here at a summary of the battles in the war. A bit of a distribution graphic on further into the military killed, prisoners of war, and such things. We try to be as specific as we could with the data we had. Now, what we can do with geographical and date-related calculations that are more interesting. For example, to better understand the conflict, it's better to understand the context in which it happened. For instance, we can call upon the map of the world at the start and the end of the conflict. We can see here the major powers. Here the colors don't help much, but it's much about this. As you can see, this isn't the Rome we usually think of. And this is the Carthaginians. These were the two great powers at the start of the war. At the end of the war, it marks the start of the, wait, that was the start. I wonder why Carthage was so little. Carthage, which originally was all this, it ended like this. We can see it further if we can do more calculations about this. First, we can speak about the principal actor in this war, the Roman Republic. We can do calculations to see how much it grew. This is the maximum extent we had on the Roman Republic. We have maps for each year for all historical countries in the years since 2000 BC till today. Here we have the Roman Republic at its maximum extent in the years 29 to 27 BC. We can use the nearest function to determine, because the map can be a bit tricky, what current country it approximates more by area. In this case, we can hear that Peru, Chad, and Niger were the most similar countries in area to the Roman Republic at its maximum extent. It can give us a better understanding of how big it was or how not so big it was. We can use also the more functions to do further calculations, such as the people that were born in the Roman Republic. We can do this using the birth date and birthplace. But by getting the birth date, I can get the polygons of that date, and we can use a geo within Q to get the entities that are located within the polygon of the Roman Republic. These calculations are a bit complex, but we are trying to make a better interface for this. We can also call I told you about at the beginning the property main actors to call upon all the battles that were fought by the Roman Republic and put it on the timeline. We can see here that this is basically the most belligerent era of the Roman Republic and marks the expansion of that nation. We can see it. If the student of history, for example, sees this, is much a better way to understand history than simply telling you about this. We can also see how Rome evolved. This is a bit small. I used here one of the latest developed functions, stacked date list plot, to show the Roman Republic, Roman Empire. Here the empire dissolved and partitioned into the Western Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern. We can see at the beginning that both of them were the size of the Roman Empire. Basically, this was the greatest extent. Here we can see, if you know the history of the Romans, this is the 3rd century crisis, and this is the end. This was a strange period where the Latin Empire existed because the Crusaders, for some reason, invaded. The polygons we have also allow us to make better calculations with the areas. For instance, we can see here in the Second Punic War, the two main participants, Carthage and the Roman Republic, and how the areas of both countries evolved in time. Here mark the beginning and ending of the war. We can see that, for instance, even though the Roman Republic didn't gain much territory in the war, it kept much the same. Ending the war, it faced a large expansion, basically because it was left as the only power, as the Macedonians and the Carthaginians were soundly defeated. Carthage, you can see, started from here and ended here. We can see that, well, the Roman Republic at the beginning of the war was 24% of the area it would gain as a republic, and 6%, if you can see, at the considering all the Roman civilization, kingdom, republic, and empire. Oh. In a curious way, the Roman Republic at the start of the war. Okay. At the start of the war was the size of Vietnam. sorry. I better rush this. We can do these calculations to see, for instance, that at the beginning of the war, Carthage was roughly the size of Iraq or Morocco. At the end, the size of the Netherlands. We can see it here. The comparing size of these two countries that were equivalently the areas of the nation at the beginning and ending. I can read this. We can see an animation of how both countries evolved during the war. You can see here first the advancement of the Carthaginians and then the response of the Romans and their final victory. Should I rush through this? Okay. Here, for instance, we can look upon the battles. Oh, great. That failed. The entity values. That's weird. Well, we can mark the battle and the year and call upon the polygons of that year, as well as this is an interesting graphic. Here we have the accumulated casualties in the years of the war. What we do here is, for each year, count the amount of battles that were before and sum all the casualties in each side. We can see here that at the beginning, the Romans were hit heavily, but at the end, the Roman casualties stabilized, while the Carthaginians go more on a exponential, almost curve. In the summary of the battles, we can, for instance, look upon the battles with more forces in them. The Battle of Cannae, obviously, is the greatest battle in the war. We can see here divided within Romans and Carthaginians. This is a total sum of military forces, because as we can see in the next slide that I am extremely rushing through, we can see, for instance, how the forces were compounded between infantry and cavalry. We can see here, for instance, that even though, for instance, in the Battle of Cannae, the Romans had the advantage over the Carthaginians won. The Battle of Zama is just the opposite. This time the Carthaginians had the advantage, but they lost. But the cavalry proved decisive in both battles. They might have least forces, but the cavalry was superior. And if you know the Battle of Cannae, you know that was one of the decisive things about that, further than the genius of Hannibal, that we can call upon. Sorry, it was some? Okay. Here, for instance, we can see all the battles that Hannibal was involved in. Here is his timeline and the battles he participated. From the Siege of Saguntum to, well, the final wars. We can see here for instance, the battles he faced. There is the Roman forces he faced and the Carthaginian forces he had, the outcome of the battle, and the odds he faced. We can see here that he usually was in the faced odds. The odds were usually against him, and still he won. Here we see his counterpart, his Roman counterpart in Scipio, the Africanus. The battles he participated. Much the same analysis as with Hannibal. And we can do a lookup to see when these two generals meet. Basically, the wars and one battle. It's curious, the two greatest generals in the war only met once. Now, well, this is basically the outline we can give with the Second Punic War. But there are a few things I couldn't explain with that war because of the nature of the war. For instance, this graph examines the sub-conflicts, the hierarchy between conflicts in the Pacific War. I couldn't do this with the Second Punic War because there is no accepted division of campaigns or anything like that. But in the Pacific War, we can see this. The Pacific War here at the center, the Malayan campaign, New Guinea campaign, and all the battles here. Also, on a strange note, we can, for instance, select, this is more a curiosity than anything, the battles that were fought a day like today, in a semi-ironic fashion. A day like today is the Battle of Soma. We can also analyze what battles were fought near this location. Make a timeline, see the parent conflicts. We can see that most of them were of the Black Hawk War, plot them in a map, separated by colors by the parent conflicts. Well, that is basically, in a rough way, the things we have. Here are the things we are now currently working on. We plan to have, as you could see, there is a property that is outcome, but it's a string. We are now parsing it to give you a number that says what faction won out the conflict. We can use this to make more calculations, like for instance, this Hannibal, the battles he fought, and in which one did he won. This we do by checking what faction did he belong to and check it against the winner faction. We can use a pie chart to determine how was his rate of victories. We can do the same for Africanus. In the Second Punic War, we can analyze and give you a map of the Roman and Carthaginian victories. The green ones are the ones that were stalemate or undecisive in some or other way. You can use also this GeoBubbles chart, for instance, to in this case, the bubbles are the size of the total casualties of each battle, and the colors represent the victories of each faction. We can see here how, because the number of battles isn't as important as how costly they were. A timeline of the victories, and well, we plan to have a better lookup for these historical things. We had a meeting about this recently that take into account the date in the geo entities. We need to have like I did with the people born in the Roman Republic. For instance, what nations, for instance, if I plan to ask, what nations in the 15th century were located in the territories of the former Roman Empire? This is something we currently can't do, but such as this, or take a date to, like, for instance, a building, and that it tells me in what nation was constructed, things like that. Finally, these are the properties we are now adding to historical countries. Regrettably, we don't have much data on population, because it would be great to, okay, I'm over time. to have more about this and compare it with the areas and the capitals.